head of the family. You've heard of the Wendigo Myth, the old Algonquian legend, a creature of insatiable hunger and cannibalistic intent, who forever haunts the desolate winter woods of North America. It's not a myth. It's true, all of it. The Wendigo is real. I can tell you that for a fact. How can I be so sure? Let me tell you. My dad always said he was head of the family, always affirmed that claim as a stamp of authority. It was his way of quelling disputes or quieting us down when we pushed him too far. Though he'd always asserted, with a broad and benevolent smile on his face and a laugh in his voice, we all knew he meant it. He was a good man, and I miss him. It's just Mom and me now, and my sister, of course. But she doesn't talk anymore. Not since that night. We moved to England right after it happened, to a little town just outside London. We'd had to get away, far away. Moving house wasn't enough. Moving to another state wouldn't do it. To feel safe, we'd had to get out of the country altogether. We knew we couldn't stay, not with that thing out there, not after what it did, not knowing the connection that had been forged between us that night. We knew it would be hunting us, that it was only a matter of time until it found us. It happened back in 2018, in late November. We were on vacation. My sister and I had finished school for the term, and we were driving up from Portland to my uncle's house on Priest Lake in northern Idaho when it happened. I remember it was a long drive. The snowfall had been, for the majority of the journey, restricted to an anemic dusting of floating flakes, but after Spokane it coalesced into a genuine blizzard that slowed our progress to a crawl. We crossed the state line at Newport, crossing the river at dusk. It was already dark, and the snow banked up beside the road was stained a lurid orange by the sodium street lights by the time we rolled into the outskirts of the little town of Priest River and turned left onto the 57 for the last leg of our journey. Slipping north past the vacant airfield, we left the little town behind us, abandoning that last oasis of light and human habitation, and heading out into the night, through the snow-bound forest that was to change all our lives forever after. The 57 was dead quiet, devoid of traffic, and it seemed as though we were the only ones foolhardy enough to be out here after dark while the blizzard raged. It seemed as though everyone else had thought better of it and had stayed at home. If only we'd done the same, everything would be different. Better. Our sphere of understanding still sane and coherent. Each of us blissfully ignorant to the truth that our world is far stranger and more terrible than the frail pastiche we're persuaded to accept as reality. As we motored north, the full force of the blizzard petered out to a dwindling confetti of flakes that fluttered, half glimpsed through the halogen headlight beams. Everyone's nerves were frayed after such a long and tedious journey, and the sporadic conversation that had begun hours before with excited anticipation of our coming vacation had by that time devolved into acerbic recriminations and doubts regarding the wisdom of the whole adventure and the suitability of our intended destination. My sister had been in full flow, energetically denouncing the notion of a winter holiday and bitterly lamenting its ascendancy over her idea of a week in Cancun, when my father's gruff voice cut her off. Slowly, he drew the Silverado to a halt 20 yards behind a truck that was parked askew across the empty road. It looked as though it were abandoned, its dark bulk blocking both lanes of the narrow highway. But its taillights were on, 2 cherry smudges in the gloom ahead, and a steady issue from the tailpipe indicated that the engine was still running. Dad honked the horn, but received no reply. Telling us to wait in the truck, he got out to investigate, dragging an overcoat across his shoulders to keep out the cold as he made his approach. I popped my door, ignoring my mother's shrill protests, and followed him at a distance, keen to join in any kind of excitement after spending so long cooped up and inert in the back of the truck. It was so silent outside, the kind of silence only found after a heavy snowfall, a deadening silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat and the rush of blood in your ears. I saw my dad rap on the passenger window, sweeping away a film of puffy flakes to peer into the cab, his hands cupped to his face. I could see his little movements as he scanned the dark interior. He stood abruptly then, startled and nonplussed, as a plaintive cry cut the snow-muffled silence. I stopped too, listening. It had come from the woods to our right. Catching sight of me, we locked eyes, frowning and bemused, each seeking in the other a validation of his own senses. It came again then, and this time I caught the words. The voice sounded frightened and confused, and close by.
Wait, what are you? What are you doing?
Dad and I cast anxious glances at one another, convinced that the voice was addressing us. There was a silent pause. Then the hidden voice spoke again, repeating the same phrase.
Wait, what are you? What are you doing?
It was weird, to say the least. Every word an inflection, every pause delivered exactly as before, like a recording on repeat. There was something subtly unnatural and disturbing in it, and with that realization came the first inkling that this wasn't right. I felt the hackles raise at the back of my neck, but before I could speak or act, the voice sounded again, its tone rising in intensity as it went, concluding in a chilling scream, and this time it was underscored by a muted, inhuman, pestilential buzz.
Don't. No. Stop that. No. Ah.
Dad's demeanor changed in a heartbeat, bluntly ordering me back to the truck. I didn't argue. I could tell by his tone that it was past time for that, and besides, after what I'd heard, I had no desire to stick around. He accompanied me to our truck, but paused only long enough to retrieve his .38 and a flashlight from the glove compartment, telling me to flip the locks. After that, he slammed the door, sealing us in against the night and the cold, and strode off into the woods. We never saw him again. Not really. The three of us waited in nervous silence, a palpable tension hanging in the air, each of us listening intently, each of us wondering what might be going on outside, peering through the rime-crusted windows into the night, a night turned suddenly sinister by the strange events of the last few minutes. After what felt like hours, but could only have been a few minutes, we were startled by 2 gunshots from somewhere out in the night, fired in close succession and followed by a distant muffled shout. Mom clawed at the door handle, determined to go to her husband's aid, but I held her back. We sat there in silent anticipation, exchanging worried glances, none of us speaking, each of us stalled by fear and at a loss what to do, scanning the dark, imposing woods that seemed now to press in around us. with frightened eyes, each mind lost in a private labyrinth of conjecture and proximal fear. At length, I caught a movement between the trees. Just a flicker of something dark and fast-moving at the corner of my eye, but when I looked, there was nothing there. There followed the heavy thud of something landing on the roof above our heads. We looked up instinctively, though there was nothing to be seen beyond the blank solidity of the roof itself. Outside, nothing moved. Inside the truck, we were left paralyzed by fear and confusion, torn by concern for my dad, by terrible imaginings, and by our own helpless inertia. 1 minute stretched to 5, and with the passing of time, the sheer intensity of my emotional state subsided. Still on high alert, but now at least able to think more clearly, I made a comprehensive survey of the vicinity of the truck, and, satisfied that nothing lurked nearby, I popped the lock and cautiously opened my door. Outside in the world, beyond the warm confines of our little sanctuary, the snowfall had finally ceased. Stepping out onto the road, I stood erect, every sense tuned by fright and by adrenaline to the finest degree of awareness. I called out, tentatively at first, self-conscious in all that pervading silence, and oddly reticent. "Dad! Dad, where are you?" There was no reply. Turning about, I saw for the first time the thing that had rested on the roof of our truck. A thing that mutely answered my call. My father's eyes stared back at me, flat and dead, gazing sightlessly back into my own from the savagely severed head that sat in a glistening slick of blood on the roof of the truck. I gasped and staggered back, shocked and reviled by the sight. Stumbling breathlessly, my knees gave out and I dropped to my ass in the snow, all my thoughts eclipsed for the moment by what I'd seen. I heard it moving then, the soft crunch of brittle twigs first, then the tentative rasp of footfalls in the fresh snow banked at the tree line. Reality flooded back in a deluge. Scrambling to my feet in panic, I turned wide-eyed, and a deathly cold washed over me at the sight of it. A grinning, inhuman face stared back at me with pale, luminous eyes. Blood, my father's blood, ran in sticky strings from between sallow fangs strewn in a too-wide smiling maw. It must have been 7 or 8 feet tall, taller than any normal man, its head surmounted by a broad pair of antlers whose icy surface glinted even in the faint overspill of the truck's headlights. It was thin, terribly thin, a study in emaciated anatomy at the very brink of starvation. Its skin was a glittering corpse-like grey, stretched tight over bones and sinews that worked and moved beneath the surface. Its eyes met mine, and the world dropped away. There was nothing but me and it. I could feel its pain, its terrible, all-consuming, insatiable hunger. A hunger that would never, ever end. Its face swam toward me through my blurred vision, and my fear slipped away at its approach, to be replaced with a numb sense of inevitability and a desire for obedience. It would devour me, and I would let it. I was jerked back to my senses by clawing hands on my collar as I was dragged bodily back into the truck by my screaming mother. Where she found the strength, where she found the courage in the face of that entity, I'll never know. Somehow she got me inside and closed and locked the door. That thing, whatever it was, remained static, its eyes locked on mine through the glass. its smile gradually fading, relaxing, devolving into an expression of desperate hate and longing, a look of naked, bestial appetite. I still get nightmares. Most nights I wake up in a cold sweat, frozen and terrified. My dreams are always the same. We're back there on that road with that thing stalking us, killing my family one by one while I look on helplessly, till I'm the only one left. What scares me most about those dreams isn't finding my father's severed head. It isn't the existential threat of that thing, or its killer instinct for blood and flesh. It isn't its blood-drenched fangs or its sinister grin, those lips alive and twitching in anticipation. No. It's my own helplessness and compliance, my own mute submission. That is what lays at the root of my despair. That's why I can never shake that perpetual haunted look in my eyes. The knowledge that, when it came to my last, I lacked the fortitude to fight. Mom says I'm head of the family now. She means well. It's her way of encouraging me, of instilling a sense of purpose and resolve. But for me, that phrase will always hold a double meaning. And the picture it conjures in my mind can never be erased from my thoughts. You have been listening to Head of the Family, Episode 18 of Savage Bites, with me, Christian Bravery. If you enjoyed this story, I'd invite you to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell. And I'd be eternally grateful if you'd share this story with any horror or creepypasta fans that you know. I really want to grow this channel. I want to keep going. I'm having an absolute blast writing and narrating these stories and illustrating them. But I'm really reliant on you guys to help me grow and help me find a wider audience. So anything you can do would be so hugely appreciated. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.